the wind blowing from the Atlantic. Ocean was freezing as it crashed against the shores of Roanoke, a small coastal island in North Carolina. The surroundings were deathly silent. It was August 18, 1590. After 3 long years in England, Governor John White stepped onto the island, and the ground beneath his feet seemed to give way. There were signs of settlement, the structures of houses, and cooking hearths, but not a single soul was in sight. Not even a dog or a cat remained. The only sounds were the rustling of leaves in the wind and the roaring of the distant sea. White cried out into the void, "Eleanor, Virginia!" But no answer came. 115 people had seemingly vanished into thin air. What had happened to the fateful inhabitants of England's first attempt at an American colony? This was no ordinary missing person case. It was a bone-chilling historical reality that would keep scientists, historians and detectives awake at night for over 4.5 centuries. Let us step into the dark labyrinth of this mystery from the very beginning to its eerie end. 1. Act Y, an ambitious queen's dream and a cursed island. The story began in 1584. Queen Elizabeth, I of England, wanted to challenge the Spanish Empire's dominance by expanding British territory into America. She tasked her favorite courtier, the famous explorer Sir Walter Raleigh, with discovering a new promised land across the Atlantic. Raleigh's scouts located an island off the coast of present-day North Carolina, an island named Roanoke. Initial reports described the island as a paradise on earth. What they did not know was that deep within its soil lay centuries of indigenous resentment and a brutal geographical trap. In 1585, Raleigh sent a group of soldiers to establish a military outpost there. However, strict military rule, severe food shortages, and violent conflicts with the native tribes, specifically the CROATOan, turned this first attempt into a bloody failure. The soldiers decapitated a local tribal chief before abandoning the colony and fleeing back to England. This bloodshed permanently sealed the tragic fate of Roanoke Island. 2. Act 2, 115 Souls and America's Firstborn. Following the initial failure, Sir Walter Raleigh altered his strategy in 1587. Instead of just soldiers, he sent civilian families who intended to settle, farm, and build a permanent life. A total of 115 people embarked on this journey, including 9 women and 11 children. John White, a professional artist who had participated in the previous expedition, was appointed governor of the new colony. White brought his own family along on this perilous venture. His pregnant daughter Eleanor and his son-in-law Ananias Dare were key members of the expedition. On July 22, 1587, after a long and grueling sea voyage, the ship arrived at Roanoke Island amidst a heavy shroud of fog. Upon landing, the settlers realized just how dire their situation was. The fort left behind by the previous expedition had been razed to the ground, and human bones lay scattered across the grass. The local indigenous people, hostile from past encounters, ambushed the English settlers almost immediately. Yet amidst the danger, a moment of profound joy occurred on August 18th, 1587. Eleanor Dare gave birth to a beautiful baby girl. They named her Virginia Dare, the first English child born on American soil. But what dark fate lay ahead for that child, only God knew. The departure and a secret agreement. Winter was fast approaching, and the surrounding forests seemed to grow darker and more menacing by the day. Casualties mounted as native warriors launched guerrilla attacks against the English settlers. The gravest threat, however, was starvation. The provisions brought from England were nearly depleted, and the settlers lacked the knowledge to cultivate the unfamiliar soil. Desperate, the colonists begged Governor John White to return to England to secure reinforcements and fresh supplies from the Queen. White initially refused. His heart could not bear to abandon his daughter and his 3-week-old granddaughter in such a hostile wilderness. Ultimately, to save the lives of the 115 settlers, he consented to leave. On the somber morning of August 27, 1587, before boarding his ship, White established a secret and vital protocol with the colonists. He told them, "I do not know how long my journey will take. If for any reason you must abandon this island, carve the name of the place where you are going onto a fort post or a tree trunk. Furthermore, if you are in distress, or if you are forced to flee due to an enemy attack, carve a Maltese cross directly above the name. That symbol will tell me you are in grave danger." White anticipated being away for 6 to 9 months at most. He had no inkling that destiny was about to raise an insurmountable barrier across the Atlantic, the Spanish Armada and 3 years of torment. When John White arrived in England in late 1587, the nation was on the brink of an existential crisis. King Philip II of Spain had assembled the Spanish Armada, the largest naval fleet in history, to invade and destroy England. Queen Elizabeth had declared a state of emergency, decreeing that no ships could leave English waters and requisitioning all civilian vessels for the war effort. White pleaded his case before the Queen's court, weeping for the starving English settlers and his helpless granddaughter across the ocean. In the face of an impending war for national survival, however, the lives of a distant colony were deemed a low priority. In 1588, White managed to secure 2 small, poorly equipped ships to attempt a rescue mission. French pirates attacked the vessels en route, nearly destroying them and forcing a wounded White to return to England. 1 year passed, then 2, then 3. Every day and every night was a living nightmare for John White. Had his little granddaughter, Virginia, perished from starvation? Had the natives massacred them all? The agonizing lack of answers drove White to the brink of madness, a ghostly return and CROATOAN. Finally, the year was 1590. Following the defeat of the Spanish Armada, the seas cleared. White secured passage on a privateering vessel heading toward Roanoke Island. On the evening of August 17, 1590, as they neared the island, the crew spotted smoke rising from the northern woods. White shouted with joy. The settlers were still alive. They spent the night sounding trumpets, firing cannons, and singing familiar English folk songs across the water to let the colonists know that help had arrived. Strangely, no light, no sound, and no response came from the shore. A ghostly silence held the island captive. The next morning, White and the sailors rowed ashore. Upon reaching the source of the smoke, they found no cooking fires, but rather a brush fire burning naturally through dry leaves and grass. They rushed toward the main settlement, but when they arrived, they were struck dumb by what they witnessed. The colony was completely gone. The organized settlement White had left behind 3 years prior had vanished. The houses had been dismantled, yet there were no signs of a battle. No broken swords, no arrowheads, and no bloodstains marked the soil. The looted possessions. Before departing, White had buried several heavy chests containing his books, maps, and personal belongings. Someone had dug them up. The pages of his books were torn, and rusted armor lay scattered through the weeds. The cryptic code. Suddenly, White's gaze fell upon a massive wooden post at the entrance of the former fort. Carved deeply into the wood in large capital letters was a single word: CROATOAN. A short distance away, on a tree trunk near the perimeter, the letters CROATOAN were carved. White's heart pounded as he inspected the carvings, scanning the bark thoroughly. Was there a Maltese cross anywhere? There was none. Not a single cross had been carved into the wood, a cruel twist of nature and final farewells. The absence of the cross brought a surge of hope to White. It indicated that the colonists had not left under duress. CROATOAN, now known as Hatteras Island, was a barrier island located roughly 50 miles south of Roanoke, inhabited by the Croatan tribe, allies of the English and home to Manteo, an indigenous youth who had visited London. White felt certain that the settlers, facing starvation, had dismantled their homes and relocated to live with their friends.